The hum of the lab was a familiar symphony to Dr. Elias Thorne. Fluorescent lights flickered above his workspace. A half-finished equation scrawled across the whiteboard beside a tangle of wires and half-disassembled gadgets. His latest project, a mess of circuits and coils, sprawled across his desk. For the past year, borderline obsession had fueled him. The idea that our reality wasn't as solid as physics proclaimed. What if, just a hair's breadth away, another dimension lay overlapped with our own? His theory was outlandish, ridiculed by colleagues. But they didn't understand, not the way Elias did. It started with the headaches, not normal ones, a gnawing pressure behind his eyes, as if his brain was trying to see something it shouldn't. Then came the flicker, just glimpses at first, a flash of a familiar object subtly askew, or the feeling of someone standing just beyond his peripheral vision that vanished when he turned. Hallucinations, was the medical verdict. Stress, lack of sleep. Anything but what Elias believed. His mind was catching glimpses of a neighboring reality. He wasn't going crazy. He was cracking a universal code. With renewed desperation, he plunged deeper. Esoteric waveforms, electromagnetic frequencies designed to tickle the veil between dimensions. Whatever it was. In the dead of night, in his overcluttered lab, he finally cobbled together a working prototype, an ungainly, oscillating device he dubbed the phase shifter. Elias hesitated, staring at the phase shifter. Years of work, of ridicule, of his sanity hanging in the balance, all boiled down to this moment. The power switch was laughably simple, just a repurposed toggle from an old radio. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and flipped the switch. An immediate jolt of vertigo nearly sent him to his knees. Then, the world shifted. It wasn't a dramatic change, nothing swirling into kaleidoscopic patterns. Instead, reality doubled slightly. It was as if he was seeing the world superimposed over itself, but with a subtle offset. His own reflection stared back from the metal cabinet, but moved a fraction of a second out of sync, hands raised with a flicker of after-image like a lagging video feed. The whiteboard behind him was no longer just a single plane, but a ghostly stack of images receding into unseen space. He had done it. Over the next few days, Elias existed in a blur of adrenaline and disbelief. He'd shift in and out of the double vision, painstakingly noting observations. The second reality wasn't a mirror. There were variations, subtle and unnerving. A stack of books slightly taller, a clock marking a different minute. Sometimes he'd catch glimpses of movement in the secondary layer, shadows without substance. It was as tantalizing as it was horrifying. His apartment became less a home and more a lab extension. He barely slept. Food became an inconvenient necessity, every free moment spent poring over data or tweaking the phase shifter. One morning, with bleary eyes and a trembling hand, he reached for his coffee mug. He grasped nothing but air. That's when he saw it. His mug, sitting perfectly where he always left it, was invisible to him. But in the shifted dimension, it hovered, ghost-like and faintly translucent. Panic flooded him. Was he losing his grip on our reality altogether? Was he about to vanish entirely, leaving nothing but an empty coffee mug in his wake? He needed someone else to witness this, to verify that his mind wasn't crumbling. Dr. Evelyn Chen was not thrilled by his late-night call. A former student and respected physicist in her own right, she'd always been skeptical of Elias's fringe theories. Grudgingly, she agreed to visit, likely hoping she could bring him back down to earth. Her initial reaction was precisely what he expected. Polite concern masking a thinly veiled diagnosis of exhaustion-induced psychosis. Then, With trembling hands, Elias activated the phase shifter. Evelyn's eyes widened with something beyond shock. It was validation. He guided her through the doubled apartment, the shifted objects, the way his own body seemed to flicker around the edges as he moved between the dimensions. She ran her hands through a stack of books, feeling the real ones and the ghostly echoes. The excitement he felt then wasn't simply vindication, it was something more profound. It was the thrill of upending everything science thought it knew, the weight of an impossible discovery dawning on them both. Evelyn barely left his side after that. The phase shifter was constantly active, their notes piled high, filled with chaotic scribbles, unanswered questions, and an undercurrent of awe bordering on fear. This wasn't about a paper or accolades anymore. This was, well, they didn't know exactly what it was. A door cracked open just enough to send an icy draft into the known universe. They dubbed the second dimension the Echoverse. Within it, objects seemed both familiar and subtly wrong. Textures were misaligned, colours slightly muted, and always, at the edge of perception, that sensation of unseen movement. Whether it was merely another layer of physics or something stranger was impossible to know. Word, of course, spread. First hushed whispers in academic circles, then the inevitable leak to a journalist hungry for a scoop. The press descended on Elias's small lab like a biblical plague. Offers poured in from research institutions eager to claim ownership of the discovery. Suddenly, the quiet hum of his equipment was drowned out by the demands of the outside world. But what did he even want? Fame? Fortune? These felt hollow compared to the thrill of exploration, the sheer weight of the questions they were only beginning to understand. One evening, Evelyn found him staring vacantly at the phase shifter. The device, with its haphazard wires and crude dials, was a ridiculously inadequate gateway to another, whatever it was, but it was enough for now. "They want to industrialize it," he mumbled, "replicate it, weaponize it. I didn't do this for that." Her reply was soft, yet held a shared resolve. "Then we won't let them." In the days that followed, they meticulously dismantled the phase shifter. Every salvaged part disappeared into unmarked boxes. Elias erased equations, shredded notes, and carefully destroyed all hard drives containing his research. It was a scientific suicide, but they did it with the somber determination of those burning maps, leading to a forbidden treasure. The scientific world was furious, baffled by their disappearance into self-imposed obscurity. News headlines blared about lost breakthroughs and selfish scientists hoarding knowledge. Yet, somewhere within Elias's modest emptied apartment, there was a flicker of peace. That night, over instant ramen and lukewarm beer, they raised a toast, not to fame nor groundbreaking discoveries. Instead, they clung to a more fragile victory, the freedom to explore without exploitation, to satisfy curiosity untethered from expectations. It was, of course, naive to think it would end there. The world wouldn't forget that easily. The Echoverse, that tantalizing impossibility, would continue to haunt dreams and budgets of countless scientists and military strategists alike. Whispers of the mad physicist who disappeared would become a cautionary tale, or a legend, depending on who you asked. But in the quiet, sometimes flickering confines of whatever small town they chose to call home, Elias would on occasion turn to Evelyn, the catch of a familiar idea in his eyes, and ask with barely contained excitement, "So, what do we build next?"